I mean, it's interesting because I mentioned in my maiden speech something that Harry Holland used to always ask. He was one of the early leaders of the Labour Party, and his first test was, is it right for the people of New Zealand? In fact, I was speaking at a Rotary Club earlier this week on Monday, and they had therefore four principles as well, and they were very much aligned with the Labour Party principles. The number one principle they asked is it right for the people of New Zealand? And if Harry Holland thought it was right for the people of New Zealand, then the Labour Party would move forward and start the policy process and put that into place. But I look at this and I ask 12 and 13-year-olds, is this right? Is this right? The fundamental test, it fails under any test. And I want to tell you a story. I heard an interview with a woman called Celia Ashley. I think we'll all know her. She's a prison reformer. And she said of all the people she had ever met in the prison system, she thought there were only 6 who couldn't be reformed. And this woman meant many, many men, many evil buggers in the prison system, only 6 that couldn't be rehabilitated. And on a plane down from Auckland one time, I was sitting next to Shana Elias, and I mentioned this to her and said, what are your views on this? This was at a point after the Honourable Minister Simon Power had said that Shana Elias is not in a position to comment on judicial matters, being the Chief Judge. You know, what would she know about judicial matters anyway? But anyway, I mentioned this to Shana Elias and said, what's your view on this? And she said, yes, I concur with this. I think that there are very, very few people that enter our criminal system that actually can't be rehabilitated. Now, what I'm saying, if you call, this is about language. Politics is about language. Messaging is about language. If you say to a 12 or 13-year-old that you are a criminal, a 12-year-old is a criminal, then what you have done is you have set them on a path to jail. You have set them on a path to jail. This is not what is necessary. Now, you know, I read the Hawke's Bay today. I read the papers. There's been a lot of assaults. There's been a lot of crime. And let's face facts. We're all tough on crime. We want to be tough on crime. Crime is a scourge of our society. But these are committed by people who are over the age of 21, over the age of 18. 12, 13-year-olds, as MPs, we have all been to intermediate schools. We've all seen these kids run around the fields, and that's where they should be. They should be kicking rugby balls around. They should be throwing softballs around. They should be throwing netballs through hoops. These are not criminals. If you label them as criminals, then you are labelling for the rest of their life. And this comes back actually to national standards. And this is why all the top academics are against national standards. Because if you label a kid a failure, then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You label a 12-year-old a criminal, you label a 13-year-old a criminal, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is not about that. Is it about mentoring? Is it about... It astounds me, actually. It astounds me because we all know... In fact, my colleague Moana Mackie said the police are going to run into a whole lot of complaints about this. Oh, they won't. I'll tell you why they won't. With all due respect to my colleague, because she's a very articulate speaker and she knows what she's talking about, because science and technology is her background. But I'll tell you why the police won't run into a whole lot of complaints about this, because 12 and 13-year-olds simply do not know their rights. They do not know their rights. So if a policeman comes along to a 12 or 13-year-old, they're not going to complain because they hardly know what foot to put their shoes on. We're talking about children here, for God's sake. We're not talking about criminals, we're talking about children. Why can't you say it's children? When was the last time you visited an intermediate? I remember. Sandra Gowdy. When was the last time that student visited an intermediate? There's a kids running around in shorts with bare feet kicking rugby balls. And it astounds me that we want to label these children. We want to label them as criminals and we set them. Now, I think one of the things we must address is actually what's the cause of this? Poverty. I'll tell you what. In Hawke's Bay, for example, there are 70% of people in Hawke's Bay earning under $40,000. 70% of people in Hawke's Bay got no tax cut in that government's reforms, and 70% of people are going to be screwed when this government increases GST to 15%. It's as if they don't even care. It's as if you don't even care. Where is the caring society that we all came from? Where is the community spirit? It's disappeared. And this is just one further step in eroding the community spirit that this party is born to believe in. That I would like to think the vast majority of New Zealanders believe in, community spirit. But you want to take 12 and 13-year-olds away. You want to take them away, and we're not talking about people, we're talking about children. You take DNA from these guys, you're labelling them for
Order.
life. You're labelling them for life.
Order.
You
The
know?
member must include.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair. You're not at all, because I know you're a decent...
Order.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. What is happening here is this government is removing any vestige of community. Mr. Chair?
Stuart Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I would like to talk about, and what I think that really needs addressing in this House, and what the Labour Party works very hard to address, is actually what are the causes of poverty. Why have we got 12 and 13-year-olds committing crimes that in the past we just didn't see? And I'll tell you what it is. It's the breakdown of the community, and this is what is happening here. We have got people working second and third jobs simply to put food on the table, to put petrol in the car, to put clothes on the children, and to buy textbooks. You give tax cuts to those earning over $70,000, and we're only talking the 8% of the population, and you make the other 75% of the population pay more in GST, because we all know this is the case. 75% of people in this country earn under $40,000. 75%. And I'll tell you what.
A point of order, Chester Borrows.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We are debating Part 2, amendments to the Criminal Investigations Body Samples Act and amendments to the Criminal Justice Act. We've had national standards, we've had GST, we've had tax cuts, we've had the causes of poverty, and we've had sweet Fanny Adams about Part 2.
Order. I think the member himself got a little bit elaborate in his explanation. I think members know that relevance is one of the issues I consider before taking a closure. Stuart Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suppose my point, with regards to DNA testing, I actually see taking DNA from 12 and 13-year-olds is actually a breach of human rights. It's a breach of human rights, because these are members of our society, Mr. Chair, who in fact do not have any understanding of their rights. These are members of our society, Mr. Chair, who should be looked after, who should be coveted by our society, who should be looked after by our society, and yet we're taking DNA. By taking DNA, Mr. Chair, what we are in effect doing is putting them on a database and criminalising them for life. It's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as the Honourable Member Moana Mackie mentioned, there are a whole lot of unintended consequences of this. We've got the DSIR or CSR, whatever they're called these days. They're being restructured, Mr. Chair. As you know, ESR, they're being restructured because now they've got to have a profit motive. But it's probably user pays. It'll be GST on top of that, we all know, because that's going up to 15% to hurt the most affected. But what we're actually seeing here, Mr. Chair, is an increased cost to society, not only of marginalising and criminalising the most vulnerable in our society, but in effect what we're doing here is making our CSIs, making our police undertake procedures that are in effect, they know they're a waste of time, Mr. Chair. They know that this is not helping society. They know this is not about productivity. They know this is not about protecting society. This is pure and utter politics. This is politics. Now, I know if the vast majority of New Zealanders, Mr. Chair, look into their heart and say, do we want to criminalise 12 and 13-year-olds? Do we want to take DNA? Do we want to take DNA? Do we want to violate the human rights of 12 and 13-year-olds by forcing them to give swabs? Is that what we signed up for? Is that what we voted for? Is that the sort of society that we want? Is that the sort of country that we want to live in? My answer to every single question is no. These are children. These are children, Mr. Chairman. And I think that what we are in effect doing is we are seeing the breakdown of our communities. We talk about a government that's inclusive, that wants economic development, and yet here we have legislation in front of us which in effect is marginalising those who are the most vulnerable, when in fact we should be picking them up, we should be giving them opportunities, we should be providing them with aspiration. You know, it's easy to talk about aspiration as we beat them down, as we heap all this stuff on top of them and say, you cannot achieve because you're a criminal. Well, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, Mr. Chair. And I, for one, am absolutely proud to be part of this, very proud to be part of this party who stands up for the rights of children, who stands up for the rights of children, who stands up for a 12-year-old. They're not even in their teens, for goodness sake. You know, the